What happens when the place that shaped your childhood memories simply ceases to exist? Not because it was erased by a sudden natural disaster or a volcanic eruption, but because humanity quietly, systematically, and greedily bled it dry until the soil itself refused to breathe. We often treat ecological collapse as an abstract warning for the distant future, a headline we can afford to read with mild concern and then quickly forget. But for one man, a world-renowned visual chronicler of human suffering, the apocalypse was not a future warning. It was a brutal, physical reality waiting for him at his own front door. This is the story of a completely dead mountain in Minas Gerais, Brazil, a vast wasteland of eroded soil where modern agricultural scientists explicitly claimed nothing could ever grow again. Yet, over 20 grueling years, a single couple set out to prove the experts wrong, weaponizing over 2 million native seeds to challenge the absolute finality of extinction. What followed was not just a successful tree planting initiative, it was a radical, scientifically baffling resurrection of an entire localized climate system that proved nature is merely waiting for us to give it a second chance. To understand the miracle of this resurrection, we must first understand the depth of the trauma that preceded it. In the late 1990s, the legendary Brazilian documentary photographer Sebastião Salgado returned home from documenting the genocide in Rwanda. For decades, his camera lens had captured the absolute darkest, most horrifying corners of human nature, from the brutal gold mines of Serra Pelada to the devastating famines of the Sahel. He was a man deeply broken in spirit, physically exhausted by the sheer volume of human suffering he had witnessed, and practically dying from the psychological trauma. Searching for the quiet sanctuary of his youth, he sought the massive, vibrant paradise of his family's cattle ranch in Minas Gerais, a place he vividly remembered as a sprawling, lush haven of the Atlantic forest, teeming with multi-layered canopies and wild predators. But the paradise of his childhood memories had completely vanished. In its place stood a scarred, dead landscape of historical devastation. The rich, ancient topsoil had been violently stripped away by decades of overgrazing, intensive cattle farming, and reckless, unregulated deforestation. The rivers had choked to a halt under mountains of silt. The ancient freshwater springs had completely dried up, and less than 1% of the original forest cover remained. The land was as dead, sterile, and deeply traumatized as the human war zones Salgado had just left behind. It was a silent, baking desert of red clay, completely abandoned by the birds and the predators that once called it home, leaving nothing but an empty monument to human greed. While legal experts, government officials, and agricultural advisors looked at the barren, baking hills and saw a permanent, irreversible write-off, Salgado's wife, Lélia de Luiz Wanek Salgado, saw something else entirely. She looked at the dead mountain and proposed an idea so wildly ambitious, so expensive, and so structurally difficult that many modern botanists deemed it mathematically and biologically impossible. She suggested they rebuild the entire ecosystem completely from scratch. They did not just want to plant a few rows of commercial trees to make the landscape look aesthetically pleasing. They aimed to recreate the highly complex, ancient, and biodiverse structure of the lost Atlantic forest. In 1998, they turned the decimated family ranch into a grand living laboratory for earth science, founding what would become known as Instituto Terra. The scientific community at the time was deeply skeptical, and for good reason. Replanting a destroyed tropical ecosystem requires far more than dropping random seeds into holes. It demands an intimate, flawless understanding of soil chemistry, microclimates, and complex botanical succession. The vital topsoil was gone, packed hard as concrete by thousands of heavy cattle hooves over half a century of farming. The structural integrity of the soil was completely compromised, meaning that any eventual rainwater would simply wash over the surface as flash floods rather than penetrating the subterranean water table. To the rational, scientific mind of the late 20th century, it was nothing short of a fool's errand. The early years of the project were characterized by brutal trial and error, defined by intense heartbreak and backbreaking manual labor under the tropical sun. Sebastião and Lélia quickly realized that exotic, fast-growing trees like eucalyptus would do absolutely nothing to heal the complex land. They needed the precise, ancient genetic blueprint of the local biome. They began sourcing seeds from the surviving distant pockets of the regional forest, eventually collecting and cultivating over 200 distinct species of native trees. The science of their strategy required a strict adherence to natural ecological succession. You cannot simply plant a delicate, shade-loving canopy giant in the middle of a baking, sun-scorched desert and expect it to survive. The rules of earth science required them to first plant hardy, sun-tolerant pioneer species. These aggressive, resilient shrubs and small trees were designed by evolution to survive in nutrient-poor soil, fix vital nitrogen into the earth, and create the very first patches of precious shade. Underneath this newly engineered protective canopy, the team could then introduce the secondary and tertiary tree species, the slow-growing hardwoods that would eventually form the permanent, towering roof of the forest. In the first year alone, despite their calculated efforts, more than 60% of the fragile saplings died in the unyielding heat. But the couple refused to halt. They adapted their techniques, enriched the planting holes with natural organic matter, and kept digging, year after year, tree by tree, transforming a graveyard into a nursery. As the millions of native roots began to weave a complex subterranean net, deep beneath the hills, a profound macro-level geological transformation occurred quietly underground. When a landscape is entirely deforested, rainfall becomes a highly destructive force, causing severe topsoil erosion, washing away vital nutrients, and leading to catastrophic flash floods in the valleys below. But with the structural return of the roots, the soil transformed into a massive, highly efficient sponge. The next time the heavy tropical rains fell, the water did not rush destructively down the hillsides. Instead, it was captured by the forest floor, gently filtering deep down into the ancient, long-dormant aquifers that lay beneath the ranch. Then, a natural phenomenon occurred that left local farmers and geologists completely stunned. The natural freshwater springs of the estate, which had been bone dry for over 2 decades, suddenly began to weep water once again. At first, it was a mere trickle through the mud, but within a few seasons, it evolved into steady, crystal-clear streams flowing constantly throughout the entire year, defying the surrounding droughts. The return of the water altered the regional microclimate entirely. The ambient temperature of the area dropped significantly. The air grew thick with moisture, and the localized cycle of evaporation and precipitation successfully restored a dependable, gentle pattern of rainfall to a region that had been slipping rapidly toward desertification. With the successful restoration of water and structural shade, the grandest and most emotional stage of rewilding took over, because nature began to manage itself without human intervention. The animals, which no one had manually reintroduced or cross-located, possessed an incredible evolutionary memory. From miles away, across fragmented, degraded landscapes, they detected the return of a healthy, functioning ecosystem and began to migrate back home on their own accord. Today, what was once a silent, dead mountain is a deafening, vibrant symphony of tropical biodiversity. Over 170 species of birds have permanently returned, filling the canopy with their ancient songs. More than 30 species of mammals, including endangered primates and the elusive apex predator, the jaguar, now claim this regenerated land as their territory. Reptiles, amphibians, and countless vital insect species have filled the intricate, cascading ecological niches, creating a self-sustaining web of life that operates exactly as it did 5 centuries ago, before European colonization. Sebastián Salgado, the man who spent his life documenting the deep, bleeding scars of human conflict, successfully healed the deep scars of his own homeland. He proved with hard biological data that nature does not need centuries to recover from human greed. It simply requires us to stop destroying it and to thoughtfully, scientifically, clear the path for its inevitable return. The story of Instituto Terra is the ultimate global proof that ecological despair is a choice, not a permanent destiny. If a broken, traumatized couple armed with nothing but unyielding determination and indigenous seeds can bring a completely dead mountain back to life, imagine what humanity can achieve if we redirect our collective intellect and resources toward restoration rather than exploitation. The Earth possesses an unbelievable, latent power to heal itself. It is just waiting for us to give it the chance it deserves. This is the core mission of everything we explore here. We map the hidden resilience of our planet, bringing you the hard science and the emotional truths of our rapidly changing world. If you believe that our planet deserves a second chance, and if you want to understand the deep, beautiful systems that keep our world alive, join our global community. Support our independent science storytelling by subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who needs a reason to hope today. Thank you for watching Deep Science of Earth. Keep looking deeper, and we will see you in the next journey.